Hey, this is Six Bolt and Von Doom's lab. This is a technical support video for the Hook of the Reaper project. Since there is no technical support for the Hook of the Reaper program, thought the next best thing to do is create videos for the major problems that I've seen. So this is the third one, and this one I've seen maybe 3 or 4 times through the history of Hook of the Reaper, which is about 3/4 of the year, almost getting up to a year now. So, pretty much, what is it? Well, it's kind of an easy one. It's just when the serial port write failed. So, this is where you'd be playing a game and you're using a serial port light gun, which is like the majority of light guns. I think there's 8 of them, and you get a little pop-up error message that says, "Hey, serial port write failed," and it'll give you an error, I think. And last couple times it would just another name for it also is kind of like Hook of the Reaper crashes all the time for certain people, and this is because of a problem with Microsoft. I kind of get later, and I'll tell you why it was. Is more with the pop-up message why it was crashing. Then also when it really in the early kind of life of Hook of the Reaper was kind of more the MAME hooker works, but Hook of the Reaper doesn't problem. And I'll try to go why that is at the bottom and tell you what's kind of the difference between Hook of the Reaper and MAME hooker and why there's kind of like a difference with this problem. Okay, so why does this problem happen with the light gun? So like I said, you'll be playing a game, and during the game an error message will pop up. It depends on kind of how bad that connection is with the serial port for it to happen. And of course now the serial port is all virtual serial port connections. Everything's just going through the USB. So it's not actually a real serial port, it's actually just the USB where data is going back and forth. And then the USB supports a virtual serial port. So you get the error pop-up message. Like I said, depends on how bad the connection is, how much it will happen. And it says, hey, the serial port write failed. And this is after Hook of the Reaper tried to do the write 3 times. So it tried 3 times in a row to try to do the write, and if all those fail 3 times in a row, that's when you get the pop-up message saying, so there must be, something really wrong. And like I said, it's a problem with the USB. So with the USB, it can be a lot of things. It could be with the port, it could be with the cabling, but the vast majority of all the time, it's always with the USB extension cable. So this is where you plug the extension cable into your computer, then extension goes out, then it hooks up to your light gun, then goes up to your light gun. So making the USB cord longer. And I think all of them, if I'm not wrong, has been through the extension cable. So when this problem happens, it actually affects the output and input, right? It's just not the output, not the force feedback that Hook of the Reaper is doing. It's also doing the input, right? So if there's enough noise or something happened with the USB that it's failing the output rights, probably the same thing's happening when you get the input stuff too. So definitely you can have a problem with that. And I've seen that. I've seen where when it gets like really bad, it can mess up the inputs too. Okay, so now I'm kind of go through kind of why Hook of the Reaper used to crash. I think I just ripped it all out at version 1.1.9, and it kind of worked most parts, but still happening. I think I did a half fix, I think, before that, like probably 1.1.5 or 4, somewhere around there. So there's been kind of multiple changes, but pretty much it's because Microsoft sucks. I mean, I'm not really that too big of a Microsoft fan, but what happens is when the write fails, it's supposed to, you can ask for, what went wrong, give us like debug info, and format it. Then once you format it and all that, you call for the pointer. But the problem is sometimes that pointer is just pointing to nowhere. And it's crap, or it's a null pointer. So when I take that pointer and use it as a string and try to put it into that pop-up message, yeah, it just crashes because it's just pointing to nothing, just to a random memory address. So that just crashes everything. It crashes the program because it's just a bad pointer. So that's kind of why sometimes when I was working, it would just not. I think it should bring up the pop-up. I don't know if it did bring up the pop. Sometimes it'll crash. Sometimes it'll bring up the pop. It turns like I said, I fixed it. A lot of it, I started trying to check if it was a pointer to nowhere or if a null pointer. If it's a null pointer, then I didn't use it. But still, if it's a pointer to nowhere, it still would crash it. So I thought it was just, if I checked for the null, it would fix it. But no, that didn't fix it. But yeah, that's why I had a lot of fun with Microsoft. And yeah, I'm not too big a fan too much with them. But that's why it was kind of a Hook of the Reaper crashed all the time kind of problem. But then now that I fixed it, now you should get up the pop-up message all the time saying, hey, it's failing to write. Okay, so now let's get into let's make sure, let's verify that is kind of the USB problem happening. Well, how can you do that with Hook of the Reaper? So I created a debug mode in Hook of the Reaper, and that's found in the settings. And there's at the bottom there's called debug, then there's bypass serial port write checks. So it pretty much does what it says it does. It just bypasses those checks. And of course then there's no more checks, there's no pop-up error. So now it doesn't care if it failed or passed or anything. It just kind of tries to write it and kind of like throw it over the fence, and doesn't matter if it failed or not. So here I can show you in Hook of the Reaper how to do that. So you come up here, you go to Edit, and you go to the bottom to Settings. Then right down here you see Debug, and you have Bypass Serial Port Write Checks. So when you click this, a little pop-up message will come up saying, this is only for debug, don't use it for normal use. You definitely can try it out to try to find hardware fails. That's why I said USB port for it. But it's definitely highly recommended to kind of like leave it on, because if USB writes are failing a lot, then you should probably fix it, then try to just, instead of ignoring it. So in this, you have to say yes. Then after that, you can just go, then you have to go update, or you can do update and close. So now it should be on. So now if I come to settings, you'll see it's on. So once you have that on, now you go back to, the games that were failing, and you play those games again, try to do it multiple times, and to see if we have no more errors or anything. And if it's playing and it's working kind of good, then most likely it's the USB problem. So it can be a USB port or USB cable. So, but like I said, if it's really bad, it can start messing up the inputs too. And I've even seen that in games where I can, if we have a bad connection, where, like example, you pull the trigger and it will throw a grenade instead of shooting a bullet, right? So, or all of a sudden you're moving the crosshair around and the crosshair like shoots off to the left or right. Every once in a while. That's kind of showing you, hey, there's something not right. So it's kind of easy thing. So you can do that, and if things go away, like I said, that kind of pins it down to the USB. So now it's the USB. You want to go back and disable the bypass serial check. So you want to come back here, go to settings, and uncheck that box. it can, update or update close. So now it's back. Now it's checking and all that. So now that's when it's checking, you need to start kind of swapping things out, right? So like I said, if you're using a USB extension, try to use a different one, or if you can, remove it if possible. That's probably the best thing to do. Like I said, most all these are always been kind of a crappy, you know, $1.29 from Amazon kind of thing. Nothing kind of wrong with that, but sometimes those cheap extension things are not really made too well. And like I said, if you have any it's not a lot of noise on it, that can be a problem, especially with when the clock is embedded into the data. So if you look at USB 1 and 2 or USB 2, it's just 4 pins. You have power and ground, then you have data plus and data minus. It's a balanced single. So the data plus and data minus, but as you can see, there's no clock signal in there. So where's the clock? Well, the clock is embedded into the data. So what it does, it searches where it flips the data, the edges of the data. Then once it finds the edges of the data, it syncs up the other clock, then moves it out, like 180 degrees to put it right in the middle of the data. And then that's where it kind of strobes where the data is. So that's why if you have like a lot of noises and kind of a lot of spikes, it can totally see where it tries to try to move the clock onto those spikes, and all that can mess it up a lot. And that's how like PCI Express works, and Hypertransport and Intel CSI. That they're all clock embedded kind of stuff. Okay, so like I said, try a different USB extension, then play the game again multiple times to see if you can get the error again. If the error doesn't come back again, then hey, you fixed it. But another thing is, well, what if you're not using an extension? Is probably the best try to use a different USB port. So I seen the best are probably on the back of the computer. That's kind of where some of the best ones are. You can try there. Sometimes I had some luck with, I bought a little 5 1/4 USB drive and SD card thing, all the micro card things, and that one worked really good, but it actually had power, it had some filtering on it, and that one worked really good. But usually USB hubs are not like the best to try usually. So yeah, like I said, try the different port to see if that helps out. Then like I said, play the games again, see if you get the errors or not. If you're still getting errors after trying multiple ports with no extension, the only thing is, another thing you can do is you can buy some ferrite beads. So if you ever saw in a power supply, those little black cylinders at the end of it, that's kind of like a ferrite bead. It kind of sucks up like EMI, or like, so if it's having spikes and all that, that ferrite bead will try to lower it. And it's more for the power system, because you only can feed back so much EMI back into the power supply or power grid. But those can help out. So you can put them on the light gun's USB cable at both ends. And that might help out filter out some of the noise to try to keep the USB clean. But and if that's still a problem, if you have like a do-it-yourself light gun that you made and you're having this problem, then it could easily be like you didn't do, like you messed up a solder joint or something, like ground, especially with like ground is like not connected good or something. So if you did build a like do it yourself board, you might want to open it up and check the solder, check the wires and all that. And if you did get a board or a light gun from a manufacturer, you can probably talk to them about it if you're still having issues with the USB. You can say all the stuff you went through. But that's kind of about what you can do to try to fix the problem. So the last one is the MAME hooker worked, but Hook of the Reaper didn't. And that's because MAME hooker didn't check the serial port rights. So kind of like when you do in the debug and you shut off and you bypass the serial port, it's pretty much what MAME hooker does all the time. It connects the serial port, and long as that connects, after that it doesn't really care. It just throws it over the wall. It doesn't matter if it's not or not. No, you know, and you can say, hey, it's a video game. It's not like a high thing you need. If you miss one time, it might be not, but still, you should be checking your rights all the time. Sorry, my old electrical engineer. I know I'm not, and not a program developer, but my background is electrical engineering, and you always check your rights. So that's why I did it. I mean, in the beginning, I did only have it do it one time, and it failed. Then it aired out, and like I said, it's a game. It's not too bad, so that's why I put in 2 more tries. So it does the first try, then it has 2 more tries after that, and that's where you get the 3. And I might up it maybe later, but like I said, it's not really that big of a problem. This one's very, very small. But then, like I said, so Hook of the Reaper checks for the serial port rights, and that's where, like some of the people had, this USB extension problem. MAME hooker worked for them, but Hook of the Reaper didn't. And that's because I was checking rights and rights were failing, but MAME hooker didn't. So that's why it looked like MAME hooker working, but Hook of the Reaper didn't. And that's more because I was doing the right thing, kind of thing. But now that doesn't seem too much of a problem. That kind of goes away, and it seems like a lot of Hook of the Reaper has taken over a lot of the things. So which is cool. I mean, I don't know if it really has or not, but it seems like it. Or a lot of people have options and all that, so it seems like still MAME hooker's still around. I shouldn't say that because I know on some drives you can pick MAME hooker or Hook of the Reaper. They give you a choice and all that. So, but anyways, but that's it. So thanks. Bye.